Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. Today, it's another hardcore mediumship episode with me, and we're going to take a deeper look at reincarnation and see what some of the world's religions have to say about that. And at the end of the show, I'll be sharing some techniques so that you can connect to your own past life memories. What does Wikipedia have to say about reincarnation? They basically said that it derives from Latin and literally means entering the flesh again. Reincarnation literally translates to be made flesh again. It's the belief that the soul, after the death of the body, comes back to earth in another body. A new personality is developed during each time on earth, but the soul itself, or the oversoul, remains constant throughout successive lives. Reincarnation can be otherwise expressed as the law of cause and effect. You do something and there's an effect. And we all have past lives. The idea that some children of ages 2 to 6 not only remember a previous existence, but can identify loved ones from that lifetime in pictures, etc., when they've never met them in person, call them by name, etc., and or recall being another person. That is a concept that's still pretty new to most of us here in the West. One misconception that people have about reincarnation is thinking that if they were to reincarnate, then they would just have to recycle immediately into their next life and not have a break in the heavenly realms. But people are actually free to spend as much time as they wish in the afterlife before they come to earth again. And another misconception about reincarnation is that we're being punished by being made to come back, or that we didn't, get it the first time, so we have to repeat our studies. And that isn't the way that it is either, although we might be working on a personal project throughout many lifetimes, a sort of personal soul challenge, if you will. There is freedom in choice, and we do choose to incarnate, to become physical. The ultimate purpose of it, though, what would that be? Why do you think we reincarnate? The obvious answer is probably that we come here to learn enough lessons and gain experiences from the earth lives so that we don't need to reincarnate. We come all knowing and all perfect and everything, and we don't have to come back. And that's one idea about that. But there are other reasons too that we might come back for. One might be to assist people that we love, or maybe we're a higher soul and we don't really need to come back, but we enjoy playing a role and experiencing the physical realm again. We might be reluctant in our return, but guilt ourselves into coming back, feeling like it was the right thing to do. I need to do that over. I didn't do very well the last time that I was there, but nobody makes us come. And we might even choose to reincarnate just for the purpose of holding a space so that spirit can work through us. And for people that are born with multiple disabilities and maybe not able to communicate as effectively as some other people, or for people that have gone into a coma state or severe dementia, the reason that they might be hanging on is they've chosen to hold a space, because our existence here in the physical world is pretty magical. It is the place of miracles. It's not really miraculous to manifest something when you're out of body, but it's pretty darn miraculous to bring something from nothing, from a thought, until it becomes a thing. And there are rules and laws attached to the physical world that aren't at all related to the spirit world. Related, yes, in a continuum kind of sense, but there are particular laws that affect the physical world. And so learning those and mastery of the physical dimension, that takes a pretty hardy soul. So if you're here, you're a badass, and I'm proud you're here. So there are many other life purposes, I'm sure, many reasons to be in the physical state. Sometimes people are scared to come in, so they just come in for a really short time because that's all they can handle, or they may choose to come in as an animal so that their lifespan, unless they're like a macaw or a parrot, is shorter than a human lifespan. We can really accomplish a lot between lives as well, but there's a certain rugged beauty to the physical world, and being at the leading edge of divine self expression, manifesting things, and being crystallized in the physical dimension, being aspects of the universal mind, that's really something. It's not just everyday thing. Jane Roberts is the medium who channeled Seth. You might be familiar with the books of Seth, their channeled works. If you haven't, you might want to check them out. On one of the sessions, or more than one, they focused on the topic of reincarnation. Seth was the being who Jane Roberts, the medium, brought through. And Seth explained that time and space are basically illusions. He argues that only parts of a person's soul incarnate in any specific reality because we are multidimensional entities and we're simultaneously experiencing perception and life in many contexts. And I would agree with that. I think we have multiple bodies. We have our earth body and then our etheric body, and goes on up there. And we can access the experience of that body and even up onto the highest plane where I guess our Akashic records would be stored, and remember who we were and where we're going and see the future and be outside of time and space. CrystalLinks.com talks about reincarnation and explains that the earthly journey of the soul is experiencing linear time and that it plays a part in the return to awareness. Some call this a rebirth of consciousness, that we are beings of light who experience in the physical world and are about to return to the light. At that point, when we have a rebirth of consciousness, we'll understand everything. I'm not sure that we're ever omniscient because that's just probably beyond our comprehension, but we do have access to all information. I was thinking, well, why don't we remember? And although many of us do, children do because they haven't been conditioned to think otherwise and they're less stressed than we are as adults. And people can recall past life memories when they resurface and become pertinent to us. We might have a relationship and boom, there we have a memory of being with that person in another time. Or we might go to a country and get out the airplane and feel like we've come home, even though we've never in this lifetime visited that country. One reason that we might not remember is that all knowledge is stored deeply in our subconscious mind. And this is a blessing because of the trauma and the emotional processing that would be required to manage even our single life. You know how much it takes just to handle the details of the day and get the life under control and deal with things that have occurred. Well, imagine that multiplied by however many lifetimes you've had. And I think life has been on the planet a long time, and we're not the only planet, nor is this the only physical dimension. And we've all lost someone that we love. We've all done things we regret. We've all suffered a hardship. And I think a collective recall of all of our lives could be pretty overwhelming while we're in the physical body and seeing life through the lens of physicality. There was an interesting article in the Epoch Times in December 2014, and it was called "Psychologist Says Children with Past Life Memories Exhibit PTSD Symptoms." And it reads, "Children who report memories of violent deaths in past lives may suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. According to the psychologist Dr. Haraldsson, professor emeritus at the University of Iceland in Reykjavik, from the ages of 2 to 6, children are more likely to talk about being someone else, often someone who experienced trauma, a soldier who died in the line of fire, a pilot who crashed, a murder victim. The memories can have a negative psychological impact on the child. Some become distressed about having left their other family or home and wanting to return. Some have phobias related to the traumatic death that they remember. Some are haunted by the traumas of their past lives in flashbacks or nightmares. Some remember foreign languages and things they couldn't possibly have known, like how to play the piano. A person's previous incarnations can shape certain aspects of their emotional makeup as well as their physical body. Some people still bear marks or scars from other lifetimes, as if the template of the body remembered the experience of the former body and formed a new body with the old problems and physical markings. The most detailed collection of personal reports in favor of reincarnation was published by Professor Ian Stevenson from UVA in a book called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. He spent over 40 years devoted to the study of children that had spoken about a past life, and in each case, he had methodically documented the child's statements. Then he identified the deceased person the child allegedly identified with, verified the facts of the deceased person's life that matched the child's memory. He also matched birthmarks and birth defects to wounds and scars on the deceased, verifiable by medical records such as autopsy photographs. And in a fairly typical case, typical in his world of encountering so many children with wonderful past life memories or not so great past life memories, a boy in Beirut spoke of being a 25-year-old mechanic that was thrown to his death from a speeding car on a beach road. According to multiple witnesses, the boy provided the name of the driver, the exact location of the crash, the names of the mechanic's sisters and parents and cousins, and the people he went hunting with, all of which turned out to match the life of a man who had died several years before the boy was born and who had no connection to the boy's family. CrystalLinks.com says some people see themselves transforming into other characters recorded in history or as entities from the other worlds and non-recorded history. Sometimes people tap into collective consciousness and view life from the eyes of someone else. This is not difficult, as reality is nothing more than a conscious experience. When you see yourself as someone famous in a past life, it's possible that you're playing that role in a parallel reality. I call it visiting the History Channel because that's how I was introduced to the concept of that. And I talk about that experience in another episode. Seeing yourself as someone else and maybe feeling that you were that person, but you weren't that person because you just experienced that role in a parallel reality. And she says at Crystal Links that it's more likely that you have matched your grid matrix with that of the other person and believe that you are one and the same. Famous World War II General George Patton was a staunch believer in reincarnation. He often claimed to have seen vivid, lifelike visions of his ancestors, and his family attested to this. In particular, Patton believed he was a reincarnation of General Hannibal, as well as a reincarnation of Julius Caesar. Henry Ford, the creator of the auto, was convinced that he had lived before, most recently as a soldier killed in battle at Gettysburg. A quote from the San Francisco Examiner from 1928 described Ford's belief, "When I discovered reincarnation, it was as if I had found a universal plan. I realized that there was a chance to work out my ideas. Time was no longer limited. I was no longer a slave to the hands of the clock." If you missed the first half of the show or you'd like to listen to any of the other episodes that we've created, you can find them on YouTube. Just look at Medium Tracey Lockwood on YouTube and you'll find them. If you're interested in information about private readings or private psychic tutoring or mediumship tutoring, or even the professional psychic mediumship certification program that's about to begin, please visit my website at medium TraceyLockwood.com. So we were talking before the break about Henry Ford and his quote that was in the San Francisco Examiner. And he continues, "Genius is experience. Some seem to think that it's a gift or a talent, but it's the fruit of many long experiences in many lifetimes. Some are older souls than others, and so they know more. The discovery of reincarnation put my mind at ease." That's Henry Ford. Saddam Hussein believed that he was the reincarnation of the ancient Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. And Mozart was composing entire symphonies by the time that he was 6 years old. Beethoven and Bach were similar. Genius in almost every art form has emerged at almost unbelievable ages, showing a proclivity for talent far beyond mortal logic. So I think that's another reason that we can guess that we might have been around the block before. There's a site called listverse.com, and they mention some cases that demonstrate proof of reincarnation, including transferred birthmarks or marks that replicate a cause of death in a past life, replicating handwriting, like being able to write like the person you were in the past life, or just doing it naturally, not being able to, being born knowing a different language and being able to read or speak it fluently without being taught, and more commonly being born with memories of past lives. And I wanted to share one of the examples listverse.com gave. Dr. Brian Weiss, Weiss, I think you may know, he's a psychiatrist, hypnotherapist, author. He specializes in past life regression and research on reincarnation, past life regression, future life progression, and the survival of the human soul after death. Dr. Brian Weiss became involved with past life regression through his involvement with a patient named Catherine. During a regression session, Catherine shocked Dr. Weiss when she mentioned that she was in an in-between state, and that both Dr. Weiss's father and his son were present. Catherine went on to say, "Your father's here and your son, who is a small child. Your father says you will know him because his name is Avram, and your daughter is named after him. Also, his death was due to his heart. Your son's heart is also important because it was backwards like a chicken's. He wanted to show you that medicine could only go so far, that its scope is very limited." Well, Dr. Weiss was shocked. Photos of his living son, Jordan, as well as his daughter were on his desk, but Catherine seemed to be talking about Adam, the doctor's firstborn, who had died at only 23 days old. Adam had been diagnosed with pulmonary veins that had grown on the wrong side of the heart, effectively backwards. His father went by the name Alvin, but his Hebrew name was Avram, just as she had suggested. His daughter Amy was named for her grandfather. The revelation changed the course of his career and threw him into a study of past lives and reincarnation. And Catherine's example supports my claim that all of us are mediums, because she wasn't trained or anything else. She just got into that relaxed state. And when we're in that theta or delta state of mind, we can connect with anyone, anywhere in the matrix, and we have access to our collective knowledge and the Akashic records, insight from other realms, our various embodiments, and more. Belief in reincarnation has ancient roots. The doctrine is the central tenet within Hinduism and Jainism, and it was entertained by ancient Greek philosophers, supported by many modern neo-pagans, New Agers, and followers of Spiritism, and also by the practitioners of certain African spiritual traditions and students of the Kabbalah and the Gnostic and esoteric Christianity. Both supported the concept of reincarnation. CrystalLinks.com states that the Buddhist concept of rebirth differs significantly from the Hindu-based traditions and the New Age movements, in that in the Buddhist tradition there is no eternal self to reincarnate. The Egyptian Book of the Dead mentions the journey of the soul into the next world, but not coming back to earth. Ancient Egyptians embalmed the dead so that the body might be preserved to accompany the soul to that world, and that might suggest in their belief in resurrection rather than reincarnation. Maybe, maybe not. In Jainism, particular reference is given to how devas also reincarnate after they die. Those are energy beings, can be considered gods. A Jainist who accumulates enough good karma may become a deva, but this is certainly seen as undesirable, since devas eventually die and one might then come back as a lesser being. So this belief is also common in other schools of Hinduism. In India, the concept of reincarnation was first recorded in the Upanishads in 800 BC, and those are the philosophical and religious texts that were written originally in Sanskrit, but they were not found in the Vedas. So before that, the Vedas were before the Upanishads. According to Hinduism, the soul is immortal, while the body is subject to birth and death. The Bhagavad Gita states, quote, "Worn out garments are shed by the body. Worn out bodies are shed by the dweller within the body. New bodies are donned by the dweller like garments." The idea that the soul of any living being, including animals, humans, and plants, reincarnates is intricately linked to that of karma. Karma literally means action or deeds. It is the sum of one's actions, the force that determines one's next reincarnation. The cycle of death and rebirth governed by karma is referred to as samsara. One is reborn on account of desire. A person desires to be born because he or she wants to enjoy the worldly pleasures. I mean, goodness sakes, it is the planet of sex and chocolate, right? Those worldly pleasures can only be enjoyed through a body. And although Hinduism doesn't teach that all worldly pleasures are sinful, it does teach that they can never bring deep, lasting happiness or peace, which is, of course, the evolution of the soul. According to the Hindu sage Adi Shankar Acharya, the world as we ordinarily understand it is like a dream. It's fleeting and it's illusory. To be trapped in samsara is the result of ignorance of the true nature of being. After many births, every person eventually becomes dissatisfied with the limited happiness that the worldly pleasures can bring. At this point, a person begins to seek higher forms of happiness, which can only be attained through spiritual experience. When, after much spiritual practice, a person finally realizes his or her own divine nature, realizes that our true self is the immortal soul rather than the body or the ego, all desire for the pleasures of this world will vanish, since they will seem insipid compared to the spiritual state of being. And when all desire has vanished, the person will not be reborn anymore. When the cycle of rebirth then comes to an end, a person is said to have achieved moksha, or the other word for it would be salvation. Followers of the Advaita Vedanta school believe that they will spend eternity absorbed in the perfect peace and happiness that comes with the realization that all existence is one, and that the immortal soul is part of that existence. The followers of the dualistic school, on the other hand, perform their worship with the goal of spending eternity in the spirit world or heaven in the blessed company of the Supreme Being. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the goddess Kali, the mistress of life, death, and rebirth, governs the wheel of becoming. This is the wheel of reincarnation. Kali is considered the great mother that all may pass through to enter the afterworld. Since according to Buddhism, there's no permanent or unchanging self-identity, then there can be no transmigration in the strictest sense. And transmigration is the soul passing from one body to another, from one being to another, either human, animal, or inanimate. However, the Buddha himself referred to his past lives, and Buddhism teaches that what is reborn is not the person, but that one moment gives rise to another, and that momentum continues even after death. It's a more subtle concept than the usual notion of reincarnation, and it reflects the sophisticated Buddhist concept of personality existing even within one's lifetime without a soul. Buddhism never rejected samsara, the process of rebirth, but suggests that it occurs across 6 realms of being. It's considered to be very rare for a person to be reborn in the immediate next life as a human. Tibetan Buddhists do believe that a newborn child can be the rebirth of some important departed Lama, and the Buddha has this to say on rebirth: "Thou believest, O Master, that things are reborn, that they migrate in an evolution of life, and that subject to the law of karma, we must reap what we sow. Yet thou teachest the non-existence of the soul. Thy disciples praise utter self-extinction as the highest bliss of nirvana. If I am merely a combination of sankharas, my existence will cease when I die. If I am merely a compound of sensations and ideas and desires, where can I go at the dissolution of my body?" The Buddha answered, "O Brahman, thou art religious in earnest. Thou art seriously concerned about thy soul, yet is thy work in vain, because thou art lacking in the one thing that is needful. There is rebirth of character, but no transmigration of self. Thy thought forms reappear, but there is no ego entity transferred. The stanza uttered by a teacher is reborn in the scholar who repeats the word." I want to just interject here that what I think that means is that our perception or our awareness continue, but our ego or our personality do not. At least I think that's what it means. Buddhism denies the reality of a permanent self, together with all things pertaining to the phenomenal world. So the human existence is considered to be generated by 5 collective components: the body, sensation, and perception, which are related to the physical world. The body, sensation, and perception. Mental activity and consciousness, which are related to the unseen world. All 5 elements are impermanent, according to this, and they undergo constant transformation. Mankind usually thinks that he has a self because of consciousness. I would say because we're walking around in separate bodies in the physical world. But since we are in a constant process of becoming and change, consciousness can't be identified with a permanent, unchanging self. Therefore, something has to reincarnate because of the dictates of karma. So when asked about the differences between people in the matters of lifespan, some people are sick and some are wealthy and some are strong and all that, the Buddha taught that it is deeds that classify men into high or low status. Sort of by your works will you be known, or by the things you do, actions speak louder than words. But if there's no real self, then who would inherit the deeds and reincarnate? And Buddha answered that only karma is passing from one life to another. And he used the illustration of the light of a candle. You take the candle and you light the next one, but the candle doesn't have a substance. The light is not belonging to the candle. It's given to it and it is passed along, but it's not the candle itself. In other words, our light is transferred to another and the light continues to burn. And in the same manner, there's rebirth without the transfer of a self from one body to another. The only link from one life to the next is of a causative nature, like our actions and our deeds. At Crystal Link thought that was the weirdest definition of reincarnation ever, but I can kind of get it, that our bodies and our personalities are sort of like a suit we wear, and that the essence of our being is not contained in that. Anyway, hope it made sense to you. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes experiences where people are in the intermediate state between 2 incarnations. that suggests that the deceased keeps some personal attributes. And I agree with that as a medium, because when I connect with a spirit, they definitely have their personality intact when they're communicating. But it is an in-between state, and there are higher realms. They mention the mental body, which can't be injured by the visions experienced by the deceased, says that when that happens, when you have a vision and you're dying, don't be afraid, don't feel terror. You have a mental body made of instincts, and even if it's killed or dismembered, it still cannot die. So the fact that you're a natural form of voidness, I liked that, voidness, anger at being injured is unnecessary. And that's from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So whatever the condition of the deceased after death might be, any personal nucleus vanishes right before birth. So you don't have that psychomental element transferred. So the newborn person doesn't remember anything from the previous lives or trips into the realm of the intermediate state. The Dalai Lama, who is the head of Tibetan Buddhist tradition, incarnated many times throughout the century, resuming his position from lifetime to lifetime. And the first time that happened was in 1391 AD, when a boy came forward and said that he was the incarnation of the Dalai Lama. But he was accepted by the priests because of the many signs that he produced. He proceeded to demonstrate miracles of knowing, telepathy, mind reading, and knowledge of ceremonies that proved his claim. They started that tradition of the golden child. You've heard of that. Taoist documents as early as the Han Dynasty claimed that Lao Tzu appeared on Earth as different persons in different times, beginning in 3rd century BC. And Chuang Tzu states, "Birth is not a beginning, death is not an end. There is existence without limitation. There is continuity without a starting point. Existence without limitation is space. Continuity without a starting point is time. There is birth, there is death, there is issuing forth, there is entering in." Sikhs, another religion that believes in reincarnation, Sikhs believe that every creature has a soul. Upon death, the soul is passed from one body until another, until liberation. And that journey of the soul is governed by the deeds and actions that we perform during our lives. If we perform good deeds and actions and remember the Creator, we attain a better life. On the contrary, if we carry out evil actions and sinful deeds, we'll be incarnated in lower life forms like snakes and lions and zebras and monkeys and hippopotami. So the person who evolved to spiritual perfection attains salvation, which is a union with God. And that really, whether you're religious or not, if you think of it on a vibrational plane, lower vibrational beings are not going to be able to ascend to a higher vibrational state of being unless they release the resistance and the thoughts that are constraining them and have a curiosity and a desire to go higher. And that can be worked on through a physical lifetime much more intensively than it can be in other times. What I'm going to do is do a part 2, and we'll talk a little bit more about the religious perspectives of reincarnation. And then we're going to talk about 12 or more different ways that you can access past life memories. I'd like to leave you with a Buddhist blessing today. I felt that's appropriate given everything. May all beings in all worlds, whether high or low, visible or invisible, simple or complex, all beings without exception, may each and every one of them find lasting peace. May none have enmity or hatred toward one another. May none feel suffering, and may the causes of suffering be eliminated from their lives. May they instead have happiness and the causes of happiness, and may all beings be free from the painful cycles of birth and death. With this prayer, may the merit of what I say and its activities be worked toward the benefit of all that live, and all that will live or have lived shall benefit as well. And I read that in honor of a friend's son who passed about a year and a half ago. Love you, Daniel, on both sides. I'll work in another episode to finish up our reincarnation and recalling past lives so that you have it complete in your library. And please feel free to visit the YouTube channel to see what else is there. I think we have close to 100 videos that I've done. I would encourage you to get in touch with me if you have an interest in developing your skills. I would love to work with you. One of my greatest joys in life is teaching. I look forward to that. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. And remember that it's never inappropriate to be kind. And without integrity, we have nothing.